Hi everyone, welcome once again to the self-knowledge course. Today we are going to explore the topic exotericism, pseudo-esotericism, and esotericism. So today we will learn how to distinguish between different belief systems, philosophical movements, spiritual traditions, so that we can begin to recognize which forms of knowledge truly have the power to transform us a deeper and more transcendental level, right? And which ones do not. This is the conference number 25 of the phase A of this self-knowledge course that we are sharing totally for free every Mondays and Thursdays. And well, if you are not yet part of our WhatsApp group or our Telegram groups, here in the description of this video, you can find the link to join our groups and receive these lectures along with complementary material on each of these topics. And well, you know that whenever we begin like to feel that spiritual concern, when we start asking those deep unanswered questions that stir within us, or when we feel a longing to connect with something greater than ourselves, we soon realize that there are countless teachings, theories, religions, dogmas out there, all claiming to guide us towards divine understanding and towards higher realities, right? And that's why the purpose of today's lecture is to help us learn how to tell the difference between them, to recognize what defines a pseudo-esoteric school and how it differs from a truly esoteric school, right? This lecture will also help us reflect on when we currently stand in our own spiritual journey and to understand when the real experience of esoteric work actually begins. So let's begin by talking about the first type of knowledge that exists, that is exotericism. So what is it? It refers to the external knowledge, information that we acquire from the outside world all throughout our lives. Since we are born, we are exposed to this kind of knowledge. We receive it in school from an early age, from our parents and relatives, from the media, at the university, on the internet, and through the various courses that we take, and from also the books that we read, right? And well, in short, exotericism is everything that we learn from outside ourselves. So this external knowledge is always received through our personality. Remember that our personality is that part of us that develops as we grow. It is how we present ourselves to the world. And our personality is shaped by our individual taste and interest, right? Because of this personality, the external knowledge doesn't reach our consciousness directly. It is actually our personality, and specifically our intellect, that absorbed and nourished by that is nourished, right, by this kind of knowledge. And as we grow, the type of knowledge, of exoteric knowledge, with X, right, we are drawn to will depend on the preferences and the inclinations of that personality. For instance, many of us on our way to finding knowledge, spiritual knowledge, well, find this course, right? Because we are drawn to topics like astral projection, meditation, spirituality, and so on. And that interest leads us to search through the vast array of information that is now available on these subjects, right? Especially with how abundant it is in today's media, right? But within all that overwhelming variety, it's not easy to find pure knowledge, the kind that offers clear, practical guidance capable of truly helping us to progress in our inner work. And that is why, in the midst of so much information, discovering pure knowledge is a real privilege. Out of 1,000 who seek it, only one truly finds it. Not everyone succeeds in finding pure knowledge. Many end up caught in teachings or schools that ultimately don't lead to true inner transformation, right? In fact, because of karma, there are many who, due to their wrong past actions, have no right to receive pure knowledge in this life. They may have received it in past lives, but rejected it or misused it, right? And so now, even if they cross paths with this knowledge, they either don't recognize its value or they simply will walk right past it, right? But there's something important we need to understand. Even when someone doesn't encounter this, let's say, even if someone already find the knowledge, they still receive this knowledge as exoteric knowledge, that is, as external knowledge. All this course of self knowledge is exoteric at first because we are receiving it from the outside world and it is our personality who is receiving it, right? And if we don't apply this knowledge, if we don't practice it, this knowledge will remain just as another theory, just as another maybe beautiful idea that may sound logical, but never becomes something real within us. It doesn't become like a real wisdom. That is why in the conference 23rd, right, where we talked about fanaticism and mythomania, we explained that when someone received the knowledge of the three factors for the revolution of consciousness, actually two paths open up before that person. The first is the path of the believer, right? And this is the path followed by those who receive these teachings but treat them as just more information. They choose to believe in these theories, in these concepts that we're sharing here, because these ideas, I don't know, resonates with them, because they seem some logical things, because they seem inspiring, or simply because they seem, I don't know, interesting. But they don't go further. They don't make the effort to apply what they are learning in real practice. So they never verify these teachings for themselves. The believer simply accumulates knowledge, information, right? They devote themselves to believing and absorbing information from people who seem wise, spiritual, or that seems close to divine, right? If the believer is an intellectual, they might read a large number of books. They will compare opinions on these subjects, right? They will cite many authors, and they can also speak very well and with even sophistication on these subjects. But in the end, because they don't practice, they don't verify. None of what they believe in becomes from a lived reality, right? And that is the path of the believer. Now, the second path is the path of practice, right? Of the practical people. And this is the path taken by those who are not satisfied, with just believing, right? They receive the knowledge and they put it into practice. They use the tools that they are receiving and they seek personal verification of these concepts, right? Through direct experience. They, for example, hear about astral projection and they don't stop at the theory. They practice and practice until they have the experience for themselves. But they learn, let's say, about psychological death. And they understand that belief alone will not bring real change in them. So they begin to work on self-observation, right? And little by little, they begin to notice those psychological defects that are actually manifesting in them. They start asking for death, for those psychological defects, and those are the ones that start to notice, to verify by themselves the changes in their thoughts, in their emotions, in their actions, right? Even in the astral dimension, they start to witness the inner transformation that is brought by this work of psychological death that they are performing from moment to moment, right? These practical people, right? They listen about, for example, reflective meditation, as we studied in lecture number 22, and they set time aside to practice reflective meditation regularly, right? And through that effort, they begin to gain deep personal understandings on themselves. They discover the possibility of negotiating karma, for instance, and they applied it. Right? Through practice, they verify that it truly works. They learn about spiritual birth, and they take that path seriously. They work to achieve chastity. They manage to ignite the sacred fire. They practice, of course, super sex with a couple of the opposite sex, infidelity, chastity, and love. Right? They become initiated. They receive their inner sword. They begin to accumulate all that energy into their spinal column, and eventually they undergo those initiations of major mysteries. Actually, that is the practical one, and thanks to that dedication to practice, that is the one who enters what is called a mesoteric stage. They begin to truly live the inner path. This mesoteric stage or level serves as a bridge that leads us to true esotericism. But the sad reality is that very few choose the path of practice. In fact, out of 1,000 people who encounter pure knowledge, only one truly follows it through direct experience, and through practice. And well, that is what we must say about exotericism. Now let's turn our attention to what is pseudo esotericism. True esotericism means inner knowledge. So pseudo esotericism is false inner knowledge. It is something that appears to be inner knowledge, but in reality it is not. This false inner knowledge is found in the countless theories and belief systems around the world. All religions, sects, philosophies, spiritual figures, pastors, ministers, and all schools that claim they can guide us to divinity or lead us to liberation. Many of them promise that by following their teachings, we will attain salvation, or that we, by following them, by attending those places, by believing in someone, we are going to reach the union with the divine. And today, there are over 5,000 religions in the world, not to mention the many sects. And nearly all of them have something in common. They each claim to be the only path to truth and salvation. Yeah, they don't teach, they don't guide people to their inner path, to their inner work, right? So they claim to be the path to follow. They declare, of course, that all the others are wrong and they are the only path, the only way. And well, faced with so many unverified theories, people often fall into a state of inner confusion. That is why many people simply choose to follow the religion of their parents or those closest to them, to avoid the complexity of having to sort through the overwhelming number of religions and spiritual teachings out there. Eventually, they convince themselves that through faith alone, they will find salvation. But in truth, most of these cool sects, religions, are caught up in a competition, right? Fighting over who can gather the most followers, who can win the most souls. And it actually becomes a kind of a spiritual marketplace, right? A merchandising of souls. And none of it truly leads a person to inner connection with God, with reality. However, when we decide to break from these conditioned beliefs, when we begin to investigate these movements, sects, schools, religions, so on, in the internal worlds, we discover the truth, right? None of them can truly take us to real inner transformation, to real inner knowledge. They lead instead to belief, to emotional attachment, and to fanaticism. And that's it. And it is easy to say and to see that all humanity is today caught up between two extremes. On one side, people are deeply immersed in materialism, right? Obsessed with luxury, with money, with prestige, with having cars, with travels, with possessions, with high paying jobs, with fame, right? Yet at the same time, they are also immersed in psychism. That is a kind of false spirituality where nearly everyone is either part of or searching for a spiritual movement or a sect or a religion or a mystical philosophy. And what we often see is like a blend of both streams because people attend these places of worship, they pray to divinity, obviously the divinity they believe in, or they join those spiritual groups. But why? For what? Actually, most of them do this to ask for material things. Hmm? Or to learn how to use spiritual teachings or psychic powers to attract wealth, to attract abundance. And because of this, the pseudo esoteric schools who gain the most popularity today are those who promise their followers prosperity, abundance, material success in all ways, right? And by doing so, they energetically bind people to these schools, not for their liberation, but to benefit actually from that people. That is why it is important, very important, to learn how to recognize a pseudo esoteric school so we don't end up entangled, right, in one and losing our direction on the path towards self knowledge, right? And there are many different types of pseudo esoteric schools, but we will see that they all tend to share certain characteristics. By becoming aware of these signs, we can begin to discern whether the school we belong to or that we are thinking to join is truly esoteric or just another pseudo esoteric school. Let's see some of their key characteristics that can help us identify a pseudo esoteric school. First, they charge for knowledge, and they do this directly or indirectly, right? Some pressure their members to give offerings, to pay tithes regularly, right? Other type of schools impose mandatory monthly fees to their members, right? In many cases, esotericism become linked to the sale of items like perfumes, like oils, like talisman, like candles, like books, like potions, like minerals, like robes, and more. And in this way, they deceive many, convincing people that by purchasing or using those things, they are securing their salvation, or they are becoming more spiritual, or they are, making some inner progress. And well, there you can start, reflecting on what is a pseudo-esoteric school. And well, another sign of a pseudo-esoteric school is that they don't teach the three factors for the revolution of consciousness. They don't offer the precise practices that are necessary for the awakening of consciousness. They fail to teach how to achieve a spiritual birth through white tantrism or what we call suprasex. Instead, they fall into the domain of the black tantrism because they don't teach the importance of chastity, nor do they show people how to value and wisely use their sexual energy. They don't guide at all couples to unite consciously with a stable partner of the opposite sex, working to raise the sexual energy up the spine towards the higher centers without ever reaching orgasm and ejaculation. And in fact, many pseudo-esoteric schools endorse fornication through marriage. They marry people, and when they marry them, they give people permission to misuse their sexual energy. That is to go and to fornicate, but with the how can I say, but with God's blessing, let's say. Some even promote celibacy, or the rejection of sexuality, believing that this will bring them closer to divinity. And well, that is totally false. Others simply ignore the topic of sexuality, placing no real emphasis on the sacredness of sex. But they all share a common failure. They don't teach people about the profound, transformative power of sexual energy, nor how it is used to reach the awakening of our consciousness and for achieving real inner change. Well, pseudo esoteric schools also do not teach how to truly die, how to practice the psychological death. So they don't teach people how to free their consciousness from the psychological defects. Instead, they promote various distracting techniques that may sound spiritual, but they do not lead to real inner change and to real transformation. Some even teach that our sins will be forgiven simply by believing, by praying, or by attending rituals, without ever addressing the need to uproot the ego, the true source of our inner darkness, right? They also do not teach how to pay for our karmic debts. They don't explain how to consciously sacrifice ourselves for humanity in order to earn the merits needed to stop paying for our karmas with pain and start paying for them with our love actions, right? They never mention that karma can be paid off entirely within a single lifetime and that we must do so. Nor they teach that karma can be negotiated or how to negotiate a karma consciously. Instead, they repeat the old phrase, and all roads leads to Rome. And with this false idea, they confuse people. They make them believe that it doesn't really matter who or what they are following. They, as long as they believe and stay loyal to a certain faith, they will be saved. And well, another characteristic is that almost all pseudo-esoteric schools are driven by intellectualism, but not by direct practice. That is the one that leads to real verification. They often suggest or outright claim that esoteric knowledge can be acquired just by reading books. And that is not true, right? It doesn't matter how many books you have read. If you haven't practiced, you have no wisdom. You have no real inner knowledge. And well, their teachings are confusing. They may sound profound or mysterious, even ineffable when talking, but ultimately they lead nowhere, right? And they present many ideas, but these become mere distractions, entertainments for the mind, keeping people busy, yet far from discovering the truth within themselves. And well, these schools also tend to foster fanaticism and mythomania in their followers, and they manipulate people through fear, and they feed this mystical pride on their followers. Another characteristic is that they mix forces. They often combine elements of higher spiritual teachings with negative forces and entities. And whenever forces are mixed, the original pure force is lost, while a third, distorted, wrong force is created that becomes destructive, right? This makes the true inner advancement impossible and binds people even more strongly to these beliefs. And many of these schools promotes actually practices linked to the Black Lodge. Yeah, black magic practices, offering methods to, for example, awaken powers and psychic faculties, but without eliminating the ego. And when you do these practices, you can surely awaken some of these latent powers that we all have. But as you have the ego totally alive, it's the ego, not the consciousness, that will use those faculties. They also teach the use of candles, of cards, of crystals, of pendulums, and so on. They delve into parapsychology, spiritualism, or spiritism, mediumship, witchcraft, and the manipulation of elemental forces. Some dedicate themselves to healing practices, but they do so without the permission of the divine law. We must remember that every illness is karmic, right? It's a consequence of a past bad action, a debt that we must be we must pay, right? In this case, through pain. Then, to heal someone for real without the consent of divine law is to violate the law. And that violation creates karma, more karma, both for the person being healed and for the one who is performing the healing. Even more concerning is that the beings granting these healing powers are never divine beings. They are negative entities. And when someone heals using the power of those entities, they are actually creating a bond, like a link, between the person that is being healed and the entity that is giving that person the power to do so. And from that moment on, that entity has the right to demand energy from that person again and again as a repayment for the favor that is receiving. And well, that is why it's so important to investigate these things directly through conscious astral experiences, right? So you can clearly perceive and verify these realities for yourself. Okay, and well, one of the most defining traits of pseudo esotericism is that it doesn't teach the need to seek the self realization, nor does it emphasize that this goal must be achieved in a single lifetime. And as a result of this, people are deprived of the opportunity to understand and to fulfill the true purpose of their existence. And this causes little by little to lose faith in our inner being. And instead, we begin placing our trust in all those external elements, right? Negative entities and black magicians actually take advantage of all of this. They establish all kinds of pseudo-esoteric schools everywhere with the purpose of diverting the souls from their inner path. They also distort the spiritual teachings, high spiritual teachings, because the truth is that nearly all religions nowadays and philosophical system originally contained pure inner knowledge, but nowadays they are under the dominion of these entities. But over time, especially with the degeneration of humanity, and because of this, those teachings began to decay. And when we manage to investigate these things internally, we discover how the original esoteric principle in those religions, spiritual systems, and so on have been totally corrupted. In fact, most are now led by black magicians, right? And each one of us has the responsibility to investigate these things internally, to see beyond the appearance and confirm the truth of all of this with our own consciousness. Actually, the main difference between a white magician and a black magician lies in the quality of their knowledge. That's why we have a responsibility to be reflective, conscious, and alert. And above all, we must investigate within the internal worlds with our inner being, ask our inner father to show us in the astral plane the true nature of anyone you are receiving teachings from, and to verify the teachings that you are receiving in the internal worlds to see their quality, including this one. That is a responsibility that we all have, because when actually we are involved in a certain teaching, or when we are reading, for example, the writings of a black magician, even if we are unaware of it, we are actually invoking them. We are opening ourselves. We are opening our inner worlds for those black magicians to enter. And they can put fixed ideas, obsessions in our minds, and we get up caught. So we need to be, I don't know, responsible of our inner path and start awakening our consciousness, start practicing to awaken consciousness in these higher planes where we can verify the reality of everything that is here in this physical world. Well, now let's take a moment to clarify what do we really mean by esotericism. Esotericism is inner knowledge. It is occult knowledge. It is the wisdom of our own inner being. It is the knowledge that we begin to receive as we strip away all the layers of egoic conditioning that we actually have. As we progress also in the creation of our internal bodies, right? As we also apply the techniques of verification that we are learning, and we are there doing our internal investigations and directly experiencing all of this, we are receiving all this esoteric knowledge. Inner knowledge is always received in the internal worlds, and it is always received by our consciousness, never through our personality. Because, well, esoteric knowledge is meant for consciousness. It cannot be found in any external place. It is not found in the physical world. Let's say not in a manual, not in books, not in courses, not in any external schools. What we can find in the physical world are like the guidelines, the techniques, the tools that points us towards that inner knowledge. But the knowledge itself, the real esotericism, only comes from our internal worlds, from our own consciousness, when we apply those tools, when we practice sincerely, and when we open ourselves to that inexhaustible source of truth, of wisdom that actually lives inside of us. True esotericism is about knowing ourselves. And through that self-knowledge, achieving the intimate self-realization of our being. All the mental, all the spiritual development that we gain as we deepen our inner knowledge is what allows us to free ourselves, to awaken our consciousness, and through that to serve others, so they too may have the opportunity to awaken and to seek their own self-realization. And well, esoteric knowledge can only be reached through the practice of the three factors of the revolution of consciousness. Actually, these are the only three objective works that we must fulfill to reach inner knowledge. They are psychological death, eliminating our ego, right? Spiritual birth, which is practicing superior sexuality to create our internal bodies, and to consciously sacrifice ourselves for humanity, that is sharing this knowledge of the three factors with the entire world. And well, as we liberate our consciousness through this psychological death, each spark of our essence that is currently trapped within all of those psychological defects is start to be released. And when they are released, they start receiving their own inner knowledge, right? According, of course, to their own unique vocation in our microcosm. And as we create our internal bodies, what we do is that we gain the wisdom of the various dimensions of nature, because remember that those bodies allow us to have a real representation, a conscious representation on each of those dimensions. And whosoever give wisdom, whosoever wants to share this knowledge, to sacrifice for humanity, he receives wisdom back. Right? Sorry. Because when we give light, the light increases for us. That is why these are the only three works that can help us to get to awaken our consciousness. Actually, in the internal worlds, we are going to receive a great deal of knowledge. However, much of the information that we are going to receive is deeply personal. They are only for us. And most of that information that we are going to receive, we must not share with anyone, because they are things that belong to our inner being. This is especially true for comprehensions that we will receive related, for example, to our inner progress, to our initiations, and anything that pertains directly to our inner being, right? So we need to learn to distinguish when esoteric knowledge is received in a form of a closed book, and this is symbolic. It means that this knowledge that we are receiving is exclusively for our inner being. Such knowledge must not be revealed in the external world, and we must learn to keep silent about that kind of knowledge. But if the knowledge that we are receiving internally is received as an open book, then it may be shared with, for example, our students, right? And well, actually, each being has its own unique knowledge. And as our consciousness awakens and aligns with with harmony and with the nature, we gradually recover all the wisdom that we actually possessed one ago. Now, where are we, and when do we reach real esotericism? Well, let's remember that only the one who, upon receiving this knowledge, the knowledge of the three factors, chooses the path of the practical of practicing these three factors, is the one who enters the mesoteric stage, right? That leads us to true esotericism. So the one who practices verifies the three factors through direct experience, applies the different techniques that is receiving, and advance through that practice through the initiations of major mysteries until completing the first mountain of initiation, that is creating the first 5 solar bodies. When the second mountain begins is when he really lends hope for esoteric knowledge. And only after passing through the process of resurrection, having eliminated all psychological defects, he enters the esoteric school of his ray, now as an adept of that school. And then on the third mountain, when he manages to integrate the 3 primary forces of his being into one and achieve complete union or fusion with his inner father, then he there becomes a true esotericist. There. It is at this stage that he reaches the first level of universal wisdom. So there is a whole work ahead that we must do to reach true esotericism. Now, we tend to believe that all of this is very simple, that actually like reaching enlightenment or that reaching true inner knowledge is something that we can find by reading a book, but actually it is not like that. Actually, this work is very serious, requires dedication, right? That we make our efforts, our daily efforts to work on ourselves, to awaken our knowledge, because to become a real esotericist, it's not a matter of theory, but a deep inner work, right? But the mass students make a common mistakes. They begin to feel like esotericists simply because they've started, for example, listening to these teachings, or they tend to feel initiated without ever having practiced suprasex, or they tend to feel holy without having eliminated even a single psychological defect. They feel practical without ever truly practice, And all of this is because of something that we call the false building of the self. That is self-deception. We must work, we must strive to avoid falling into self-deception and instead devoting ourselves with discipline and sincerity to the path of real practice. Only that path will lead us to true esotericism. And well, let's remember that as our consciousness awakens and as we come into harmony with nature, all the wisdom that we once possessed is gradually returned to us, and we are going to be able to fuse ourselves with our inner divinity. And well, this has been today's lecture. Remember that if you have any question on this topic, you can leave them in the comment section and we are going to be answering them. And remember that if you are not yet part of our WhatsApp and Telegram groups, here in the description of the video, you can find the link to join us, right? And well, I want to invite you to our next topic where we are going to explore the world of relationships. In that lecture, we are going to learn how to improve our various relationships, our relationship with our physical world, our relationship with other people, with the planet, and most importantly, our relationship with ourselves, with our inner being, so we can move towards true happiness. And well, this is going to be next lecture. Please do not mix it. And well, thank you very much for being here and have a rest of the day. Bye bye.